Atmospherics by E. F. Benson. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. There is nothing more delightful to the thoroughly unscientific mind than to control some scientific machine which yields entertaining results and which one does not in the least understand. That, so I concluded, was, at any rate, one of the reasons why I neglected all other duties, and most other pleasures, in order to enjoy my new wireless. Ad Astra was the name of it, and a very suitable one, for it put me into communication with places that seemed as remote as the planets, and evoked from them the very music of the spheres. It had 8 valves, whatever valves might be, and 2 switches, and 2 dials, and an index which made it perfectly easy to choose, as in a dinner at a restaurant, whatever one liked. Daventry and London and Hiversham and Paris and Berlin and Vienna were waiting with their dishes. A little adjustment of the switches and manipulation of the dials was all that was necessary. And then, after a few loud howls and whistlings, I could get into touch with singers and pianists halfway across Europe. This was all romantic enough for a prosaic age, but secretly I cherished even wilder romances in connection with my Ad Astra. It was, I am proud to say, the very last word in wireless, and every now and then it seemed, to my ignorant view, to emit noises that came from none of the localities of its sumptuous index. Below the blare of an orchestra from Berlin, I sometimes caught the sound of a human voice. Below a lecture, delivered in the studio in London, I caught the sound of singing. Scientific friends, who also heard these mutterings, appeared to me to be a little puzzled about them, but they bravely asserted that they were atmospherics. Yet they did not seem quite casual enough for mere accidents of the ether. Voices certainly made coherent remarks, unexplained instruments of music played arrangements of tunes, and somehow I'd got into my head that this wonderful Ad Astra could, intermittently and fortuitously, catch sounds that were outside the range of its professed radius. After all, as Mr. Einstein has proved to those who are able to understand what he says, time and space are both dimensions of the same huge whole, and I wondered whether it was not possible that Ad Astra was reproducing sounds not only distant in space, but distant in time. But I have no scientific attainments, and the professors, though sometimes a puzzled look furrowed their serene brows when they heard these extraneous noises, continued to say atmospherics. Just now, Ad Astra was clad in its neat serge travelling suit, and placed on the seat next to me in the train that was taking me to the old Cinque-Port town of Tillingham, where I was to spend a weekend with my friend Harry Armitage, in his house called Mayor's Orchard. He had just bought this house. I had never been there before, and knew nothing whatever of it and its surroundings, except that I was aware that the sea had retreated, and that Tillingham, which was once a port, was now a couple of miles inland. As I approached my destination, it looked as if I should not, for the present, get any clearer idea of it, for we slid into a thick sea fog. And, after innumerable hootings and stoppages, I stepped out into the most impenetrable mist I have ever encountered. Harry had sent down a servant to meet and conduct me, who told me that Mayor's Orchard was but 5 minutes' walk from the station, and I followed him through the dense white dusk up the hill. I carried Ad Astra myself, and presently he threw open a door, and I found myself in a delicious Queen Anne interior. In a little parlour off the hall, I found them at tea, Harry and his wife Evie, and her sister and brother-in-law, all old friends. I consented, of course, without any pressing at all, to demonstrate the marvels of my new toy, but never have I experienced a greater fall to my pride. We got a little scrannel jazz music from London, but no other station could come through at all. The fog, no doubt, was thick in the Channel, and the Channel was populous with fog-bound ships, and we could get nothing whatever except the insistent dot and dash of Morse code, ship calling to ship. Paris and Hiversham and Berlin and Vienna were all as mute as mackerel. There was nothing but this silly, unintelligible gabble. "Frightfully interesting," said Harry at length, but a shade monotonous. "How about bridge?" "I don't want to play," said Evie. "You four play." That was amiable, but false. Evie always wants to play bridge. Besides, every now and then, through this silly babble, I knew I had heard something, which was not Morse code, and I only wanted to be left with Ad Astra and find out what it was. So, after a few politenesses on the part of the others, I found myself alone with my machine. I could cut out these tiresome noises altogether, but I found that when I did that, I also cut out the intervening something, which I so much wanted to catch, and that when the dot and dash of this intership signalling was most audible, so also was this unexplained impression of what sounded sometimes like a voice, and sometimes like faint musical notes. Wholly unscientific as I am, I realised that it was not far distant in space, at any rate, from these stupid cacklings. It had something to do, in space if not time, with them. And then, as hairbreadth by hairbreadth, I shifted the dials, I heard, not from the machine at all, but from close outside, the sound of wind. A strong breeze was rising, and the fog, no doubt, dispersing, for almost immediately these dot and dash noises completely ceased. And, now that they were silent, I knew that I was right in thinking that there was something going on below them. It emerged, growing gradually louder. There was the noise of a drum, and of a fife, and of a cornet, and they were playing God Save the King, in a windy and elementary manner, but surely with enthusiasm. Then there was the sound of a door opening, and the tune swelled out suddenly, as if the door of the house where I sat had been opened and the players were just outside. The door shut again, the tune ceased altogether, and I heard a man's voice speaking in English but with a strong, guttural German accent. "Also, it is most kind of you, Mr. Mayor," he said. "To be sure, I shall be very comfortable. That goddamn fog. Terrible. And a fool of a captain. Yes, a little supper, very pleasant. I will first to my room go." The voice ceased, but surely there were steps in the hall just outside and on the stairs. I looked out, but there was no one there, and now not a whisper came from my apparatus. This way and that, hairbreadth by hairbreadth, I moved the dials, but there was nothing of any sort audible. Presently, Harry came in from the room where they were playing bridge, and found me still endeavouring to recapture that strange intrusion. Where had it come from? And when, so I could not help asking myself, had it come from? "Still tinkering," he said. "The stars seem to be a bit in eclipse tonight. A rocket went up just now from the sea. There must be some ship run aground in the fog. I'm dummy at the moment, so I came to see if you would like to be shown your room." "You're in the King's room," Evie said. I made a final attempt and got up. "Yes, do show it to me," I said. "But why the King's room?" He led the way upstairs. "Oh, an old story," he said, "but I believe quite authentic. George II was once visiting the Cinque Ports in his yacht, and there came on a thick fog, just like there was tonight, and he ran aground in shallow water opposite Tillingham. He was brought to land in a small boat and came up to the town. The mayor met him with all the pomp that could be arranged at a moment's notice, and they brought him along here, with a fife and a drum playing God Save the King." "And then?" I asked. "He slept here. The house belonged to the mayor's orchard, you know. There are some extremely old apple trees in the garden." "Interesting," said I. "And I'm going to sleep in the room he had." "Yes, here it is. Jolly panelling, isn't it? There's a picture of the king. Thoroughly German. But, after all, he was German. He spoke English, though, which his father couldn't do, but with a strong German accent." Harry went back to his game, and it is hardly necessary to state, I instantly fetched Ad Astra up to my room. Berlin was ready to my summons now, and Vienna and Paris had never been so splendidly audible. But not a whisper more could I catch coming across the years from the night when the king slept at Mayor's Orchard. Ad Astra nobly vindicated its ability to give me all that it professed to give. But gladly would I have sacrificed all that for a few whispers more in that guttural voice. or a few more bars of that very imperfectly rendered national anthem. Atmospherics, indeed. End of Atmospherics. Recording by David H. London, 2024.